The ViewSonic XG2431 was initially only to be released in the US and across Asia, but due to popular demand, at least according to the manufacturer, it's come out in Europe and in the UK. Now, what makes it so special? Why are people caring so much about this monitor? Well, it's a 24-inch Full HD 240Hz IPS monitor, which is the very first to actually be approved by Blurbusters. For those who might not be aware, the Blurbusters certification effectively is talking about its motion clarity, and yes, we'll talk about that very shortly. Now, the monitor is not currently available to buy in Europe or in the UK, but I've been told it'll be coming out at roughly £240 in the UK and probably roughly around the same sort of price tag across Europe, while in the US it can already be found for $280. So is it worth its price tag, and how does it compare to some of the other Full HD 240Hz monitors out there on the market? Let's find out. So let's just jump straight in and talk about the blur reduction feature that ViewSonic are offering. It's called Pure XP and it can be enabled through the monitor's OSD. Now here it can be customized between the different level modes, which you'll be able to see with other manufacturers, although due to this being actually made in conjunction with Blurbusters, you've actually got a strobing utility which can be downloaded, installed, and therefore allows you to tinker around with the Pure XP function on the fly. I feel this is more targeted towards advanced users because majority of people will probably just want to go on one of the default settings, but it's absolutely fantastic to see such degree of customization, indeed allowing people to effectively make the monitor tune to them rather than the manufacturer deciding how they want the strobing feature to actually operate. Now, while that's all very good, how does it actually perform? Well, suffice to say, I've been left very impressed. The Pure XP function does exactly what it says on the tin, and you can see why this is a Blurbusters approved monitor. Indeed, via the tool that they provide, you can see that the UFOs are a lot clearer on the Pure XP mode. Not only at 240Hz, but also at 120Hz and 60Hz, whereby the latter refresh rate is quite rare to find on rival alternatives, and you can see here that it makes a night and day difference in terms of providing better motion clarity. However, that doesn't exactly paint the entire picture. See, at 60Hz there's noticeable flickering, so much so that I actually had to disable the Pure XP function in order not to attain a headache. Now, thankfully, this is not present at 120Hz nor 240Hz, so therefore PC gamers will rejoice. That said, for console gamers, or indeed for those people playing retro games at 60Hz, it's just something that you should be mindful about, and indeed cannot replicate a CRT. Now, this does actually bring me on to my next point, and that is input lag. No matter what platform you're going to be using it at, you will be disappointed to know that the Pure XP function does add to the overall input lag of this monitor. So much so that I had it objectively tested at 3.7 milliseconds, but with the Pure XP function disabled, it dropped down to a whoppingly low 2.2 milliseconds, making it one of the most impressive monitors that I've reviewed to date. Now, indeed over here, this is a potential cause for concern, because hardcore competitive gamers, who are potentially the target audience for the Pure XP function, and indeed the Blurbusters approval, might be disappointed to learn that with the function enabled, and might be one of the reason you're actually buying this monitor, input lag is hampered. So therefore, my recommendation for someone who shoved over 2,500 hours on competitive Counter-Strike and has reviewed over 200 different panels, I would actually disable the Pure XP function, because the input lag differences, while minimal, are still there, and from my subjective opinion, were something that I actually noticed while playing a game such as CSGO. Now, sticking with my subjective opinion, the monitor's response time also felt a little bit lackluster, and while it's not too bad in the grander scheme of things, in my opinion, for a Full HD 240Hz IPS monitor, it can't quite compete with the likes of the AOC or namely the Asus alternatives. Indeed, over here it just didn't feel as snappy, even while using it in terms of its ultra-fast mode preset, whereby the higher overdrive that you go, the lower response time you'll get, all while getting a worse visual experience. On the flip side, in terms of the latter, the visual experience was absolutely stellar, even in terms of its ultra-fast preset, because there's literally no inverse ghosting that I could notice. Now, in order for me to get some objective numbers, I ran it through the OSRTT tool, and indeed over here, via the overdrive standard mode preset, I had an average initial time of 5.81 milliseconds, which you'll be able to notice at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. This effectively translates to the average G2G, which a lot of manufacturers claim. Then going to the advanced mode presets, this drops down to 5.16 6 milliseconds, and going to the ultra fast preset, which is the one I'd recommend, it goes down to 4.2 milliseconds. Yet again emphasizing that the overall response time isn't too bad, but isn't exactly class leading either. Speaking of its competitors, namely the Asus, it is quite disheartening to see that this Blurbusters approved monitor does not have the ability to run VRR technologies simultaneously with the Pure XP feature enabled through the OSD. Instead, you're going to have to select between one or the other. Now, on that note, in terms of the VR technologies, it does not have a native G-Sync module, which is no surprise given its price point and in comparison to some of its competitors, and therefore means that you should get a range of 48Hz up to 240Hz. Now, I was able to certify it running NVIDIA G-Sync with my RTX 3080 while connected over DisplayPort. I didn't encounter any sort of flickering or black screen issues on the NVIDIA Pendulum demo. Better still, I was able to run Destiny 2 at Full HD at 240Hz with HDR and G-Sync all working simultaneously together, and that certainly provided a better tear-free gaming experience. Now, this does perfectly bring me onto its HDR experience, and while it only has got HDR 400 certification like some of its competitors, it does actually provide you a superior HDR experience in comparison to SDR, at least where the game supports it, and that's purely because the color performance has been fine-tuned by the manufacturer. This is somewhat of a rarity because a lot of its rivals do not actually think about doing this, and therefore when you're comparing SDR and HDR, you are actually probably going to be siding towards the SDR image instead. That's not the case with this ViewSonic monitor, so therefore if you're looking for a decent HDR performance at this refresh rate and resolution, then you might actually find yourself pleasantly surprised by what the manufacturer has been able to achieve. Now, with the gaming section out of the way, let's get onto image quality. Now, this monitor has got a flat 24-inch Full HD 240Hz IPS panel that has a matte coating to it. Now, it does have a dedicated sRGB emulation mode that you can select through the monitor's OSD, although note this does not have a wide color gamut in the first place, so even in terms of its user or, for example, native mode presets, you'll still be getting a similar performance. Now, when put across my calibrators, I noticed a gamut coverage of 98.5% in the sRGB color space and a gamut volume of 103.8%. Indeed, you can see below how it overextends in terms of the warmer tones. Now, this does hamper the overall color performance, whereby the average LTE sits at 1.02 and a maximum sits at 4.59. Lower is always better. Nonetheless, I can still see myself recommending this for serious image editing work or indeed video grading. Now, as for its measured white point, it is equally impressive at 6,586 Kelvin at 100% in comparison to the 6,504 Kelvin target, and as for its gamma curve, it sits pretty close to the 2.2 standard. Unfortunately, however, its tested contrast ratio at 814:1 is pretty disappointing. Even for an IPS panel, I was expecting the region of 1000 to 1200:1, but alas, that's not the case. Now, moving swiftly on, we get onto brightness, and indeed over here it hits the HDR 400 certification because I noted a peak of 468 nits. It's not too bad in SDR either, showing good range between 367 and 76 nits. Now, as for the Pure XP mode, it really depends as to which level you select. Light, normal, extreme and ultra presets lock you to said brightness levels which have been tested, and frankly I wouldn't be able to use a monitor regularly under 150 nits, but of course your mileage may vary depending on how you're using your monitor. Now, it's worth pointing out that there is also the custom mode preset, which I did touch upon before, and it allows you to adjust the brightness level as well. Just bear in mind that the higher brightness you go, effectively the lower motion clarity that you should be able to attain. But really in practice, I think you'll find that even in terms of the higher brightness levels, in terms of the custom mode preset, you're still getting fantastic motion clarity. Now, disabling the Pure XP function and going to an SDR image, I noticed that the brightness uniformity on my Tesla panel, which I appreciate is somewhat lottery, was not too good. I was actually expecting better performance from this 24-inch IPS monitor. Equally, when it comes to the backlight bleed, it's not overly noticeable and anything to really throw my shots off, but if you're going to be consuming a lot of dark games or movies, then you might want to consider getting a VA or TN panel altogether. Now, moving past all these tests, I should have a quick word about the monitor's build quality and features. And here it's got a 3-side borderless design with a relatively thin bottom bezel, and better still, it's not got an outlandish design. Now, as for the stand, it's very sturdy and provides you height, tilt, pivot and swivel adjustments, all of which are certainly appreciated in order for you to get the best sort of ergonomics. Now, aside from this, the monitor has got some mouse bungees, or indeed can be used for cable management. And here, if you're going to be plugging in this monitor, you'll be pleased to know that both the DisplayPort and the 2 HDMI inputs will support Full HD at 240Hz. Now, in terms of audio, you can have the built-in speakers play back some music, although I'd use that very sparingly, but you have got a 3.5mm audio jack as well, which allows you to plug in your headphones directly into the monitor. Now, if you do want to adjust the monitor's volume, you'll want to access the monitor's OSD, which can be done from the buttons found at the bottom right-hand side of the monitor. Unfortunately here, ViewSonic have chosen to omit any sort of labeling of these buttons, so therefore might be a little bit confusing at first. Nonetheless, when you do access the monitor's OSD, it provides you a plethora of different options. Although here it does seem a little bit convoluted, whereby the manufacturer has not lobbed, let's say, HDR Adaptive Sync and Pure XP with a response time setting, instead including it in two different tabs. Very small little point, but it would have been great to see a little bit better organization from the manufacturer, and therefore making it a little bit more user intuitive. So with all that in mind, it brings me on to my verdict, and quite frankly I'm very impressed by the overall motion clarity and thus understand the Blurbuster's approval, but on the flip side, the overall input lag of this monitor while using the Pure XP function does hamper the overall experience, and therefore as a hardcore competitive gamer myself, I would not want to have any sort of thing that's hampering my input lag, including, let's say, VR technologies. On that note, if you're more of a casual gamer, you'll be disappointed to know that Pure XP does not run simultaneously with the VR technologies, while one of its competitors, Asus, does offer said functionality. Now, if we were to take this all out of the equation, in other words, the overall motion blur reduction, then in terms of the response time, while very impressive, doesn't quite compete with some of the class-leading panels out there, namely from Asus again, or indeed AOC. Now, these monitors that I've reviewed and indeed referenced will be down in the description below for your considerations, and are the ones I would actively recommend as someone who plays CSGO religiously and has reviewed over 200 different panels. Now, I'd be intrigued to know what you make of the ViewSonic XG2431 down in the comment section below, and if you've liked this independent detail review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated and allows me to continue delivering honest reviews like this one. As such, I've been Totally Dubbed, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.